Hello everybody, I'm Art, and once again we are here to talk about the Advanced Generators mod. And last time we talked about syngas, but what happens if you're using Mekanism? And you're like, syngas is not enough power for what we get out of it. Well, boy howdy do we have a treat, because Mekanism has a much better fuel source. Liquid ethylene, where each bucket produces over 11 million FE or RF, or pick your power measurement unit. And it's one of those things, if you backtrack through the recipes, looks pretty bad to make, but the core of it is 4 machines total. A crusher to make biomass, an electrolytic separator to make hydrogen, a pressurized reaction chamber to make the ethylene, and a rotary condensator to make the liquid ethylene. And the very first thing we have to do is give these some power. Now, I should note that once you have this bootstrapped, I'm using a creative battery here to get it started, but once you have this started, in theory, the advanced generator should be able to keep the whole thing running. Now, once you have these, we should explain how you get to the liquid ethylene step, and we'll backtrack from here. The last step is use the condensating to turn the gaseous ethylene into the liquid ethylene. The gaseous ethylene is made inside the pressurized reaction chamber with water, hydrogen, and biofuel. The hydrogen can come from the electrolytic separator and some water to turn it into hydrogen and oxygen. The biofuel comes from the crusher, and any sort of biomass. You're going to need a farm or something to pump things into here. The usual one would be to send melons, except Mekanism doesn't really have an auto farming system, so you're going to need to come up with something for that. Once we have whatever our fuel source is, you put it in the crusher. And this machine, much like all of the rest, you're going to want to add upgrades to increase speed and energy, and maybe muffle this so it doesn't go thunk, 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 and or turn it into a factory using the installer cards to give it more concurrent jobs running at a time, because it can run between 3 and 5 depending on how advanced it is. Once you have that done, you hook up the logistical transport between the two and tell it to output. And now we have biofuel going into the PRC. The next thing you're going to need is a source of water for both the PRC and the electrolytic separator. And for this, I'm going to knock out the bottom here so that I can run it between these two. This is where Mekanism gets to be a little bit clunky. Now that we've got that done, you can see that we have water pumping in the electrolytic separator, creating hydrogen and oxygen, except we only care about the hydrogen. If this keeps pumping it in, we are going to have a problem, because it will stop when the oxygen tank is full. So what you want to do is turn idle into either dump excess or just dump it entirely, because it doesn't really matter unless you need oxygen for something else. And next we need to add in the pressurized tubes to have it eject the gas down into the PRC. Now, you do want to be careful on the electrolytic separator because it does have 2 outputs. You're going to want to make sure that the gas config here is set to output in the correct direction. In this case, I've got this set to output blue 1 to the front. I also should be super specific on this because this does not work quite right in Minecraft 1.12. I don't know which version they fixed it in to make these actually work for all of these machines, but in some versions you definitely cannot specify which side's output in which directions. So be aware you may have to fiddle with the actual specific outputs coming out from the front in this case. Now we have both water, hydrogen, and biofuel. We now have substrate coming out as well as ethylene. We will have to take the substrate out and store it or destroy it, otherwise this machine will also stop. But now we have the ethylene. The next thing we have to do is put a gas pipe on, and now we have liquid ethylene being generated inside the rotary condensator, which we can pump straight into our advanced generator now. Now, I should point out that I did this in a massively overly complicated way to show all of the connections, but Mekanism machines can pipe directly into each other. As you can see, we can make a much more compact layout here where I have everything feeding directly into each other via auto inputs, other than the water pipe there, which makes it a little bit ugly, but I'm sure there's better ways to lay this out, but this is about as compact as you can make it, because we also need to get the materials for the biomass into the crusher still. But as you can see, the crusher is auto outputting out to the right. You need to turn auto eject on in this case. The electrolytic separator is dumping excess oxygen and ejecting the hydrogen down below it. The PRC is accepting everything and venting the gas down below it into the condensator, which is then ejecting the fuel out into the pipe on the right. So all in all, it only takes a handful of machines to get a phenomenal amount of power out of your advanced generator. Your biggest bottleneck is probably going to be how fast can you actually make the biomass, because it depends on having something to mulch down and a factory set up with upgrades probably. But it's all up to you at that point because this is already generating a lot of power. And you can make bigger and bigger advanced generators to power based off of how much you can scale, and you can build it up slowly over time and possibly feed more than one generator depending on how much you make, because this fuel generates a lot of power per bucket. Anyhow, if this was interesting or entertaining, please consider like or subscribe if you're new. As always, I'm Ard. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.